Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers Podcast, Episode 6. I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda, and we're your hosts.
And today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different than the last few episodes. We're going to dive into the topic of money in relation to traveling, budgeting for your trip, budgeting during your trip, and budgeting for after your trip. Hopefully, a little bit for after your trip. If you want to take a long-term trip, obviously you're going to need to save up some money to make that happen.
Definitely. So a good place to start is, where do you want to go? Where are you looking to take your trip?
Yeah, so that's going to influence your budget a lot. And where you want to go isn't necessarily conditional on the place you want to go the best. It's because there are places like, okay, I'll just start with Europe, for example. That's a place a lot of people want to go for their first backpacking trip, but it is expensive. A hostel in Paris, for example, a dorm room would cost $40 to $60 a night. Whereas if you're in Southeast Asia and you can get that dorm room for $10 to $20 a night, you can basically travel for 4 times as long. So the issue is, do you want to go to the place you want to go, number one, or would you rather go for 4 times as long to a place that's a bit different? It may not be the top of your list, but maybe number 2 or something like that.
Exactly. And alongside that is, how long do you have to save for? When do you want to go? Are you looking to save for 2 months and then go and spend? Because if you're looking to save for, 2 months and spend 3 months in somewhere like London or Paris, and you have no savings currently, that could be very challenging.
Yeah. But it is important to say it's fairly obvious that there are options in every price range. You can spend as much or as little money as you want. There's lots of good resources out there for people who want to go traveling with zero savings whatsoever. You can go teach English abroad. For example, in China, you can make enough money to save teaching English there to go travel a bit. And you can find other employment opportunities in Australia, other places like that where you can go work and incorporate your traveling into there. We'll talk a little bit later in the podcast about opportunities for earning money and saving money and just budgeting in general during your trip. But if you are someone who is currently employed and thinking about traveling in the future, you need to create some sort of savings plan off of a budget, off of a plan you have based off what? What do you base your budget off of?
So do we want to talk a little bit about what we did to save?
Sure. So for our first trip, but both of our trips were fairly open-ended, so we didn't have a very sturdy budget. We kind of had a
loose budget?
Yeah. So our first trip, we had in mind going to Europe for 3 months.
Yeah, and then we got the vaccinations to go to Asia, but we definitely had no set plans.
Yeah, we kept it open-ended in terms of maybe we'll spend all our money, maybe we won't be having that much fun, maybe we'll want to go somewhere else.
Maybe we'll get sick, maybe we'll hate each other.
Yeah, and that came down to a big issue with us, and I think an issue with budgeting in general, is it's not so much important what plan you set. I mean, everyone's been taught how to budget for ages, time and time again. It's important that you're realistic and honest with yourself about it. For me, I know that I really struggle to stay on a budget. So I use some tools, but it's mostly just having, a kind of range that I try to stick to. Sometimes I go over it for a long period of time, but I keep a buffer zone and we tried to stay flexible in that, okay, maybe we're out of money, we can go home sooner.
Yeah, exactly. And that has been a good strategy for us, knowing that, maybe we will spend all our money, maybe we won't. In both cases we have.
But we still were able to travel for as long as we wanted to travel for. And we were traveling from a lot of different areas. So Europe to Asia to Australia to New Zealand. And you notice when you travel from area to area, prices differ a lot. So even in Europe, from Spain to Paris is super expensive. Germany is a bit more expensive, but you can in Spain and Portugal, you can
expensive.
really Switzerland as well, but you can really save a lot of money in Spain and Portugal. So you can kind of, settle in to somewhere that's a bit cheaper and then kind of poke your head out into the more expensive zones.
For sure. In terms of how we saved though for our first trip, what were some of your techniques or tips or tricks, or how did you save that money?
So the major technique I used was don't pay for my stuff by living with my parents. We had just graduated from university.
That was only a month though.
Yeah, so what we'd done during university is we both went home for the summers. Or I went home for the summers.
I didn't go home for the summers.
So I went home for the summers and was working in a family business, which allowed me to save a lot of costs and save a lot of money during it, and thankfully come out of university with no debt and savings enough to travel. Before we left, after we graduated, I also went home and lived for a while to just top up that savings for traveling.
Yeah, I think we had 5 weeks. I did go home from like May 1st until June 15th. So about 6 weeks living at home, pretty cost free, working full time, which definitely added to my bank account.
Yeah. And we both had a target in mind for the amount of money we wanted. And we just kind of kept working towards that target, and it helped that we were both in situations where there wasn't a lot of ongoing expenses and the distractions causing us to spend a lot of money.
Yeah, for sure. I decided in 2010 though, actually, like when I got my summer job in 2010, to open a high interest e-savings bank account that I couldn't get money out of from my debit card from a bank machine. And so I started putting my paychecks in there and only moving what I needed over into my other account. So I was very strict with myself with that. And then going into fourth year university, so I had my whole savings for my summer after third year. Going into my fourth year, I was very frugal with my money. It was like, do I want to go out tonight? Do I want to go out for this dinner? Do I want to spend money at the bar? Do I need this coffee? Very conscious. And I kept thinking if I did go to Starbucks and spend $5, it was like, this $5 could buy me a meal if we get to Asia.
Yeah. That's one thing it's good to set a plan for where you want to be when you want to be there, because then that's something real. So you can make decisions like that. You can see the money you're spending today as money you would have later on. It's still hard. Our recent trip that we went on in January down to South America, we had set that plan in motion a long time before.
Pretty much as soon as we got back in 2012.
And that was a different saving situation because we were fully employed, obviously living on our own, a lot more expenses. We were both using a budgeting app called Back in Black, which I really like.
Yeah.
But I was still struggling to stay on budget, especially during the summer months when there was a lot of stuff happening. But having that vision of where I want to be, and that the money I save today is going to go to me not working and just enjoying myself then helps. But you kind of have to keep reminding yourself of it.
For sure. You do have to. I mean, I have shopping temptations just as bad as the next person. And it's like, if I came out of one of my favorite stores having dropped, anywhere from $50 to $200 on clothing, it's like I come home and, then it's like, what could that have bought me on a trip? What could that have got me in South America? I mean, $200, that goes a long way in South America. That's 4 days. 4 days of travel that I spent on, I don't know, 2 clothing items. Yeah, 4 days of travel, being pretty flexible with the budget.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that we both did, aside from Back in Black, is that while we were working, we actually both put money into GICs. So, I mean, if you're a student, that may not be possible just because you might be working part-time just to earn that extra cash, or, picking up shifts as a server, just, doing whatever side jobs you have time for just to earn some money. But if you are a full-time, if you're working full-time, earning a salary, invest money into, a 6-month or 1 year GIC, because it gives you that buffer for before your trip where you can't touch that money. And it gives you a buffer for when you get home, perhaps. I think for both of us, that's been a good technique. Would you agree?
Yes and no, because I think that is, both of us have a habit to spend money to try to make ourselves happy. Me in particular with food, and you more with things. So
I like food too. We spend a lot of money on food.
Yeah. So getting it out of the way, out of my bank account, did help me. It was nice to have that money because I had a couple term deposits come due while we were traveling. So it was kind of like a timed series of events. So one thing I'll say is if you do plan to go on a long-term trip after a full year of employment, so like what we did, 2013, we worked the whole year, 2014 started and we left to go traveling. So in Canada, the registered retirement savings plan, how that works is you put money in, that money comes off of your income for that year, and then you can take it out in a year with less income. The idea being when you're retired. But if you're going on a long-term trip, your income's going to be a lot lower. So you can use that, put money into an RRSP, get a big tax return that comes out. It came out while we were traveling. And then also you can pull that money out. You just need to put it in and then you can take it out of your RSP. So you can kind of have a lot more flexibility with money. But while we were traveling, it was nice to have kind of money coming out in stages from term deposits.
Yeah, for sure. You said yes and no about that. What's the no side of that for you?
So I think that it's helpful for me, but maybe that's not the way to do it for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's totally fair. You know, some things that work for us might not work for other people. And that's why we're going to give a few different tips and tricks for sure.
So we talked about how having a hard vision of where you want to be really enables you to save, because it enables you to make those trade-off decisions. I can save now. I can not go out tonight with my friends and spend $100 on drinks at random club, and I can spend 2 days in Peru or something like that. So how do you go about setting that hard vision?
I mean, Lonely Planet is a great way. I mean, if you pick a continent, okay, so you have no idea where you want to go. You have no aspirations, but you know you want to go somewhere. I mean, for me, pictures really help. If I see images of stuff, then that kind of intrigues me. So I've used Pinterest for that sort of stuff. And then, you know, I'll go on Wiki Travel and start reading more about it. And then, so for us, once we narrowed in on South America, you know, buy a Lonely Planet or start looking in Lonely Planet forums.
Mm-hmm. And I think it depends on your reasons for going traveling too. Maybe you want to see something a lot. Maybe you just want to get away.
Yeah.
And so if you want to get away, maybe your option, you feel most comfortable going to Europe, but you can get away for, like we said earlier, maybe 4 times as long somewhere else. Like I found in South America, there was lots of a good blend between kind of uncomfortable places where you're kind of out of your comfort zone, a la uncomfortable, but places where you can kind of relax and be comfort, have the, you know, things that remind you of home, like Buenos Aires, Santiago, places like that where you can get all those comforts of home, and then places where you can push yourself to. Versus
Bolivia.
Versus somewhere like we found in Southeast Asia, you're more kind of on edge the entire time. Mm-hmm. To a degree, you can go to resorts and, you know, get into those super touristy islands, but you're kind of having a more rustic experience at times.
Yeah. Something that also helps me kind of create a firm vision is I love to read travel blogs. I love to, like, you just Google stuff about travel, like anything. You'll get blogs, and there's thousands of blogs out there. Mm-hmm. And people have lots of their budgeting tips and tricks as well. So it's like you can start seeing how they budgeted for their trip and how much money they recommend. And, you know, people really have budgets all over the map for the same location, because they've looked at, you know, what do I want to do here? Where do I want to stay? Do I want to stay in hostels and dorm rooms? Do I want to stay hostels privates? Do I want to stay in hotels? Yeah,
like I said earlier, you can spend as little and double or more, as much as you want. I think for us in our most recent trip to South America, we met people who probably spend even under half of what we spend.
Oh yeah. I was volunteering with two guys in Cusco, and they said they wouldn't do Menu del Dias, which is menu of the days for over 5 soles. That's like 250 Canadian.
So yeah, they're probably living on $10 a day.
And Ryan and I were
Like
satisfied
40.
with the 10 to 15 sole menu del dia.
Yeah, we felt good about that. But then also, we could have spent 5 times more money. We met people who are spending in kind of our similar age range and also still staying at hostels, but spending probably double.
Yeah.
You go out if you're drinking more often than we do and you're staying in private rooms.
Yeah, for sure.
And doing more tours. Where would you say if you were talking to us from 3 years ago, planning our very first trip, and maybe we hadn't been able to save as much money, where would you recommend we go?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good question. I think Southeast Asia is good. It definitely is overwhelming. I think Southeast Asia, though.
For your first backpacking experience?
Maybe. Might as well just step out of your comfort zone. I think Europe is a good way to ease into backpacking.
I don't know if I should say ease in, but like to get used to it.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely have moments in Europe where you're out of your comfort zone too.
Yeah, but that seems to be
barriers and
it seems to be the crowd you meet. There's a much younger crowd backpacking in Europe. There's still mid-20s people, but
a lot of like
18, straight out of high school, you go backpack Europe, gap year in university, backpacking Europe, because it's more of a safe, less scary place.
For sure. I guess maybe what I would have told us 3 years ago, save France and Switzerland for when you have a bit more money. Because like we didn't even go to a restaurant in Switzerland because we literally could not afford it in our budget. It was way too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Or I would have told us, if you want to do Europe, take your time in Europe, and maybe we only traveled for 4 to 5 months only in Europe, as opposed to continuing onwards and having to cut costs. I mean, there's 2 different options. What do you think?
Just going through, so we've been to, I'd say they're probably the 3 most common backpacker circuits: Europe, Southeast Asia, South America.
Yeah, Australia is a pretty popular one too.
Yeah, I guess you'd say that Australia and New Zealand kind of have a bit of a backpacker circuit there, which we've also done.
I think that actually might be more popular than South America.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But I would say to myself, go to South America. Because I found in between. I was kind of expecting something more similar to Southeast Asia. But in terms of the comfort level, it was higher than that. And you can get into lots of nice situations. And
do you think that's because we had already been to Southeast Asia, though? I've often wondered that. Or because we were learning Spanish?
No, I think that comfort comes a lot quicker when you've already dealt with
Asia.
Yeah, but
for sure. So what other advice do you have for listeners who are struggling to create a hard vision to start their budget?
Watch travel documentaries.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
So what are a few good ones? Planet Earth, the BBC program, you see a lot of really cool places. A lot of them are kind of more remote, but you're not going to get to see them, but it kind of creates some desire to go to cool places. The one backpacking show that I really love is called Departures.
It's a good one.
Yeah, a couple Canadian guys, and it's produced by OLN, but you can watch them on the OLN website, and a lot of them are on YouTube.
They're hilarious. Those guys are so funny.
Well, the one guy's funny, but they go a lot of really cool places.
Yeah.
And it's like really well shot and edited. It really creates this like longing to be somewhere awesome.
Yeah. Anthony Bourdain's Departures, or Anthony Bourdain's shows, not Departures, is a good one too.
No Reservations, and he's got like a couple other shows now, and on the one on CNN. Yeah, those show some cool places as well, kind of from the food side of things. And he goes, a lot of places.
Yeah. I also really like anything National Geographic, from documentaries to magazines I follow both their Instagram accounts. And every day I'm like adding places to my long list of places I still want to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe we'll have to do a whole nother podcast about picking a
How to pick a destination.
Yeah, I feel like we
sure.
could talk about it for ages. But once you do pick a destination, you've got it in mind, it allows you to kind of make it easier to postpone gratification. Say, okay, I'll hold on to this dollar now, I can spend it later. And do that until you get to a month before your trip. And then you're like, fuck, I should have saved more money. And then, you quit your job and you're going traveling.
Yeah. I mean, I've met people who have these big plans to travel and then they quit a job, but then they realize they don't have enough money and then they're stuck in Canada. And it's like, what are you doing? Why did you spend money on stuff?
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely not worth it, in my opinion. I think saving money, like it's worth the long-term gratification of going somewhere. And once you have that vision, I mean, there's so many resources between Lonely Planet and travel blogs to help you get a good idea of what people sort of spend in a day.
Yeah. So one good one is called budgetyourtrip.com, and it shows a lot of the average daily budget. Something you can kind of, aim to be at. But be honest and realistic with yourself. It's okay if you can't stick to a budget. If you haven't been able to stick to a budget in your life, don't set a $22 a day budget if that's what it says, and then expect to stick to that, because you're probably not going to, but that's okay.
Yeah, like we read that, for South America, on average, I mean, when you kind of average out every single country there, it says about $50 a day.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll spend probably more than that in a place like Brazil or Chile, and you'll spend less in Bolivia. And we knew from our first trip that, we can be kind of loose with our money. We like to spend money on food sometimes. And so we, added up how much we need for approximately $50 a day for approximately 6 months. And then we kind of gave ourselves a buffer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and so I think if you are someone who has trouble budgeting, make sure that you build in a plan to exit your trip early without getting stuck. So we've met quite a few people who had flights booked a long way down the road. They've run out of money. Now they need to change their flight. Their flight costs too much money to change. They have to ask their parents for money. It's just like a nightmare. So one thing that we didn't book return flights either time we went traveling. Partially because of the location we're going, and partially because we have kind of an open time frame. It can be anything. Like maybe if we start running out of money, we're like, okay, I guess we need to go home now, or figure something else out.
Yeah, exactly. And it's worked out well for us both times.
Yeah, we could have spent less money on flights, but I think the flexibility for us was great.
Yeah, for sure.
So once you are traveling, you go through the same set of budget issues that we talked about before. This instant gratification versus long-term gratification, but long-term obviously being short-term still. But you still have to decide, you get to your place and there's people in the bar, you meet someone in your dorm room who's going out that night. You're always having to make these little decisions that add up, whether to spend money today or try to hold on to it for later.
Yeah, and with activities too. Like I have a hard time. I get to a city and I see all the flyers at the front of a hostel and I grab one of each and then I want to do everything. And Ryan's pretty good about being like, okay, we can't spend like $400 in this one city on activities. And then when I actually start thinking about, what do I really want to do here? I'm enticed by the pretty pictures and the ideas of things. But it's like when I think about what I could do in other cities and other places and spend my money on, then
yeah, you have to keep, like we said, when you're at home, a vision of what you want to do later on. You kind of have to keep that going. Some ideas of the things you want to do and spend money on later on. So you can say, okay, I can hold on to this dollar in London because I want to spend it in Barcelona. Something like that. Or I want to fly to Bangkok, so I'm going to hold on to my money here in Italy.
Yeah, for sure.
But you were talking about kind of the dynamic between you and me, whether you wanted to do more stuff and I didn't. Mm-hmm. And that's a thing to really make sure you've got a grasp on if you're traveling with someone. Mm-hmm. Because if you're traveling with someone who has the urge to do everything and you don't have that urge and you've got maybe differing budgets, different spending habits, and maybe that person's not too comfortable doing things by themselves. That's kind of an issue we've run into, and it's caused conflicts between us while we were traveling.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about it, or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really love the idea of doing stuff by myself, or I haven't in the past. And so, you know, it has caused conflicts between us where it's like, I want to do this. And Ryan says, I don't want to do this, but you're welcome to. You know, I might just have a chill day and, you know, I'm upset because I want him to come with me, but it's not his responsibility. You know, it's mine.
Mm-hmm.
And so in our most recent trip, we got a lot better at, you know, having those open conversations and being like, okay, this is what I want to do here. This is what I want to do here. And perhaps, you know, we do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it'll continue to progress as we grow as people and as travel partners. You know, the next trip will be even better with it. And I think you really have to have an honest conversation with somebody if you're traveling with them. You know, what is your budget? What type of activities are you looking to do here? What places do you want to go to?
Yeah, and making sure that I think the most important questions to ask would be, are you comfortable doing things by yourself?
Yeah.
If you're going
are
in
you comfortable with me doing something that I want to do? Because you don't want to get in a situation where it's like, you know, one person does something with you that they didn't really want to do, but then they have that expectation back and you're like, well, sorry, I don't have the money to do that. Like, it's not in my budget.
Yeah, that's kind of a thing that's all too common in the world we live in today. No one really tells you what they need, what they want, but then it's kind of this, you want something, but you don't really tell me, and then I do what you want, and then I expect you to do what I want.
Yeah, and we have 100% had those growing pains in our travels.
And I think it built resentment between us when I would do something that made me anxious about the amount of money I was spending because I was worried I wouldn't have enough money for later on the trip. And it wasn't something I was particularly interested in, but I would do it because you felt like you couldn't do it on your own. And then we would go and I would, you know, be harboring a bit of resentment, and it would make, I don't know, the day not be enjoyable. Maybe a couple of days, maybe it manifested itself into another issue and we had more of a serious argument about it. But you have to be honest and open with the person you're traveling with about being able to.
Yeah, and it is really key to be honest. Just honesty, having that open communication. And it's something that, you know, we have worked on a lot. We're definitely not perfect. But, you know, we do try to have that open communication when we're traveling, especially about money and budgeting and activities and what we both want out of a trip and out of a day and what cities we want to go to and what we want to do there. And it's really important, like, if you are going to travel with somebody else, to make sure that you are on the same page. And if you're not on the same page about where you want to go and what you want to do and how much you want to spend, that you're honest with each other and you're open about the expectations from the other person.
Yeah, and on the other hand, if you are someone who's going traveling by yourself, it's one of the beautiful things about traveling is that you can really cultivate a practice of figuring out what you want. So it's so common in society through parenting and the school system to treat people as if what their wants have no, value. There's no right to get what you want. You do what your parents want. You do what the teachers want. You do what the professors want. You do what your employers want. You don't do what you want.
Yeah.
So when you're traveling by yourself, it's, you know, every day you wake up, oh, what do I want to do? And then you go do it. And that's pretty awesome. That's one of the awesome things about traveling by yourself.
It is. You do see a lot of solo travelers, though, that I think get caught up in not wanting to be alone, and they end up, you know, catching on the tail feathers of somebody else's trip. So if you are going to go alone, make sure you're doing you. Like, if somebody is doing something that you want to do, or it's somebody you want to spend time with, yeah, for sure, do it. But really make sure that, you know, same thing as if you're traveling with somebody, that you're doing everything for you and you're making sure that you spend your money the way that you want to spend it. Because at the end of the day, it's your trip and it's your money that you've budgeted for.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the practical tools that we found helpful while traveling?
Staying in hostel dorm rooms has definitely been something that we have done to cut down on costs. And I mean, as a couple, we do like privates from time to time, but in a city like Paris, it's not in our budget for us.
Yeah, we've met quite a few other couples who have been kind of surprised that we stay in dorm rooms so often, but then we met a lot of couples who would also stay in dorm rooms as well.
If there's any couples out there, it's not weird.
Yeah, if you're worrying that it's weird,
bed.
you can sleep in the same bed as well. That's not uncommon.
No, it's not. It's small. I prefer my own bed, but you know.
Yeah, and if you look at the science, apparently people sleep better apart anyway.
Yeah, I believe that. Walking to and from the train or the bus station, if it's safe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I never think that you should put yourself in danger because you don't have enough money, because you do have money to keep yourself safe, and it'll probably cost you less in the end than to lose your passport and all your valuables.
And it's important to remember to try to set a standard of how you evaluate spending decisions, because we'd find a lot of places, especially on a recent trip, where taxis were cheap, but not that cheap. But it's like, oh, we could walk, but it would only be like $4 to take a taxi. And then, so because I want to take a taxi because that's easier, I think about that and like, oh, it's only $4. A taxi at home would cost like $25. And not comparing it to the fact that, oh, it's $4. I could eat a meal for less than $4.
For sure. And we did the same thing in Southeast Asia. I remember we'd be like, oh, well, to get these spring rolls to start is only like $2 extra. But then we did it for all of our dinners.
Yeah, I guess it's just another, it's easy to make rationalizations when prices are really cheap. Because you can always go back to that home like, oh, wow, I can get an appy and it costs $1.50 Canadian, or a beer and it costs 50 cents Canadian. So you can make that rationalization super easy. So you just be aware of yourself making the rationalizations that end up with you having no money at the end of your trip.
Yeah, for sure. And on that note, another sort of tip that we like to stick by that we've mentioned in some of our other podcasts is trying to only eat out one meal a day if grocery stores are available. And in some places, eating out is about the same. We found in Southeast Asia or South America, or the grocery stores are, either non-existent or they just don't have anything that you can really cook.
Yeah, and especially if you're by yourself,
sometimes it's cheaper to eat out. But for the two of us, our general rule, especially in Europe, was to only eat out one meal a day. And that really helped us cut costs. And we really tried to take advantage of if hostels did free breakfast or, dinner deals or anything like that, because hostels do offer a lot to backpackers. So just try to take advantage of the things they do offer you.
And as far as tools go, I think the most useful thing and easiest thing is just to have a number in your head of a amount of money per day, and then just kind of keep track of your purchases and how close to going over that number it is. Because if you go over that number every day, you're going to get some anxiety about your money, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah.
But the hard thing about traveling is you have days where you book a flight, and then how do you attribute that flight into your per day money?
Yeah, that's one thing that we've struggled with. Is like, okay, this flight just cost $100. Like, does that mean I don't eat for 2 days? And no, you have to eat. You have to sleep somewhere. So, just try and be aware of the money that you are spending to try and attribute to it.
And maybe you could use a budget app in your phone if you feel comfortable carrying your phone around, just to keep a log of your purchases. Because if you are writing down everything you buy, it does keep you a bit more honest. Or you could just use a notebook too and write down when you spend money, and it keeps you more honest.
Or taking only so much cash out for the day. This is my cash for the day. This is, I do want to eat dinner later, so I should probably not buy, this coffee or this beer or this tacky souvenir that I'm never going to use ever again.
Yeah.
Which is another thing. Don't spend your money on souvenirs. I'm a souvenir hoarder. I'm saying it from somebody who's done it. Don't do it. It's just not worth it. I get home every time and I'm like, why did I buy this?
Yeah.
Why did I buy this keychain? Why do I have 400 keychains from all the places I've been?
And another good tool for finding cheap flights is Skyscanner.
Yeah.
They've got a good app, and you can kind of spread things out and look at the prices of flights over a few days.
Yeah,
And over a few locations too. Google Flights is marginal, but it's nice because you can see a few locations and decide where you want to fly.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, so another thing, if you don't have very much money, there are good opportunities to work while you're traveling, depending on the place.
Yeah, for sure. So a few things that we've heard about, haven't done yet, but have heard about is woofing, which you can go and you can stay on farms. We met people doing it in New Zealand. It's really common. And you just do a few hours of farm work a day. Get to stay for free, eat for free, and some families will even give you use of their car or 2 year round. Things like cherry picking in Australia. In Europe, there's tons of hostels where you can work and then you get your stay for free.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do run out of money or you are in a desperate situation or you just want to pick up a few bucks, there are definitely options along the way. Something else like Workaway, where you can plan a vacation and do various different jobs while being abroad, if it appeals to you.
Mm-hmm. And we found working at hostels as an opportunity in South America as well. Although given the price of hostels, you're working at a fairly low per hour rate. But if you're dealing with a finite amount of money, it's helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
So then one thing we also want to talk about was trying to set up some buffer for yourself after you travel. You don't want to get home in a situation where you have no money whatsoever, and then you have to kind of compromise what you want to do. I know a lot of people who are traveling who want to they've left a situation that's made them very unhappy at home to go traveling, and they've kind of reignited a sense of happiness, and then they go home and they don't have any money. They have to go live with their parents again. They have to move back into the same thing and start taking the same job. And they're like, I just got to work it for a little while until I get the money. Like, you're just putting yourself back in the exact same situation that made you unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are leaving, if part of the reason you're traveling is to get away from a situation that's making you unhappy, make sure before you go that you've put some thought into making sure you're not coming back into that same situation, and keep it in mind while you're traveling. I know for us, traveling 6 months, 2 times, I really didn't want to think about the end of those trips. It kind of became something where it was like, oh shit, 2 months left. Okay, I'm not going to think about this. And then like, oh wow, 1 month left. Like, oh no, 2 days left. Especially the first time. The second time we did plan more and kind of came up with a vision of what we wanted to do and how we could be happy when we came home.
Yeah.
And did that. But both times we did have enough money to create a buffer for ourselves where we didn't have to do something that really compromised our newfound life goals. For
sure. It didn't put us in a situation where we were completely, entirely miserable when we returned.
Mm-hmm. So my advice to you do whatever you want, but if you are on a trip and you're starting to run out of money, maybe go home and use that money as a buffer to set yourself up.
Yeah. Or set yourself up abroad. Figure out what you need to do though, so that you can be happy and, really get the most out of the trip you've taken. Because to me, the biggest thing about travel is personal growth and growing as a person. And you don't want to be in a situation where you've completely lost all of that.
Yeah. And another thing that we kind of touched on before about staying flexible is staying flexible with flights allows you to put yourself into better situations money-wise. For example, there's a lot of people who travel Southeast Asia and Australia and New Zealand together. And if you've got flexibility with your flights in and out of Australia, then maybe you get to Australia and you can't afford to stay there for as long as you previously wanted to. So then you can get over to Asia, because it is a situation like where the prices are almost like Europe and Australia. So you can live for kind of 4 times as long in Asia.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you plan to stay a month in Australia and do 2 months in Asia. You get there and you're like, oh wow, in a week I've spent like X amount of dollars that could have lasted me a month in Asia. Well, just bail out.
Yeah, get out of Australia, get to Asia, figure something else out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other tips or tricks you want to add? Tools? I think we've pretty much covered it.
Yeah, we've kind of gone through a wide range of thoughts and ideas. Do you have anything you want to add?
Don't let money be the source of not going. That's the one thing that I want listeners to take away. There's always ways to save money. There's always ways to put together a feasible budget to get away. So just do it.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to save, why are you not willing to save?
Yeah, a lot of people use money as an excuse not to go traveling. They say things like, oh, I would love to go, but I can't because I don't have any money. But then you look at how they're spending a whole bunch of money on
stuff.
Yeah, electronics, cars, other things like that. So if you are someone who has said that, maybe you need to do some analysis into, do you want to travel or do you want the stuff? Because you can't say you want to travel and want the stuff, because if you wanted to travel, you could.
Yeah. To me, I can't travel is not a thing. It's I'm choosing not to travel. And if that's what you're choosing, then that's fine. But if you say, I want to do this and I can't, no, you can. So make it happen. You can do it.
Yeah. There's lots of good. So that's where there's some other techniques where you can, maybe get the money out of your hands with term deposits. Maybe, for example, you work at a restaurant and you take all of your tip money and you buy.
What do you buy with it?
I was going to say you buy Bitcoin with it and you don't spend any of your Bitcoin.
Did this just turn into a Bitcoin advertisement?
Maybe. But something like that where you can, or set up, there are savings accounts where the money goes into your savings account immediately. But I think that's not really dealing with the problem. I think the problem people have when they're spending a lot of money on stuff is they're trying to use that stuff to make them happy, which is maybe a topic for another podcast.
I think so. I think we've just started diving into something bigger.
But if you do set that vision of where you want to be, I want to go traveling here. And then you can start trying to frame purchasing decisions as not, can I afford this? Yeah, I'm making X dollars. It'll be okay. I can pay my credit card, this, blah, blah, blah. You start to see it as, okay, if I spend this money here, it means I can't have 3 days on my trip.
Exactly.
And if you can start framing your decisions like that, then I think it'll help you start saving some money.
Yeah. So start planning your next trip using our show notes at www.theworldwanderers.com.
Yeah, we'll put some of our favorite tools and kind of links to.
Yeah, and just reiterate some of the advice that we've given you over the last, I don't know how long it's been.
I don't know if it's advice or just our thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. Opinions, thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you have any thoughts or ideas of your own, let us know at theworldwanderers.com.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, bye.